Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking about notes. And what are notes? Well, in fact, notes are just sounds. And sounds are actually vibrations. Notes are interesting because notes can go higher and notes can go lower. And we call this pitch. When the pitch of a note goes higher, we call it sharp. And we represent that with the symbol that looks like a hashtag or a pound symbol. When the pitch is lowered, it's called flat. And we represent that with a symbol that looks like a lowercase b. Notes are kind of like people. They need a name. And we name those sounds using the English alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. As you can tell, the notes are going higher in pitch. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But notes can also go lower in pitch. G, F, E, D, C, B, A. Music is also referred to using a numeric system known as the scale degree. This is pretty simple. Basically, each letter has a number associated with it, which tells us the order in which we are playing the notes. For example, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4. That would translate to this. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This group of notes here is also referred to as a natural minor scale. Now that means these particular notes. There are actually notes that exist in between these notes. And those notes are usually represented with sharps or flats, or those hashtag and little b symbols that we talked about earlier. So in between the A and B note, there is a note that is described as A sharp or B flat. So this is a little confusing, but in fact, A sharp and B flat are actually the same note. They just have two names. In the same way a person might have a first and last name, this note also has two qualifying names, but they're the same thing. So if you're going up, you would use the sharps. If you're going down, you would use the flats. So the note that exists between A and B is referred to as A sharp or B flat. But in between B and C, there is in fact no note. In between C and D, there is a C sharp or D flat. In between D and E, there is a D sharp or E flat. And in between E and F, there is in fact no note. In between F and G, there is a note that's called F sharp, G flat, and in between G and the following A, or the next octave, there is a G sharp or A flat. This is a little confusing the way it's written out right now, so let's try and organize it in a way that's a little bit, that's going to make a little bit more sense. If we understand the notes that we have, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we realize that there are notes in between those notes, we can organize them as such in a nice line. And if we played those notes would go like this. A sharp, B, C, C sharp, D. That last note that I just hit there is, in fact, the A, which completes our full octave, or would then take us into the next octave. So as you can see, every single note in between the A and A, or within the octave, is laid out in front of you. Once you understand this pattern, you can apply this to any instrument that you play, and you'll always know where you are and what vibration you are actually achieving. Another thing to understand is the unit of measurement between the notes. So this is going to help translate this onto the instrument that you play. So the space between A and A sharp is called a semitone. This translates on the piano to one note, any key that you move to. The next one could be the white to black or the white to white, just the next one in the row. On the guitar, this translates to the adjacent fret. If you play the A string, A, first fret, A sharp, second fret, B, third fret, C. So these semitone movements are also called half steps. A half step will always be a half step. So if I move the semitone marker to B, the space between B and C is a half step. The space between C and C sharp is a half step. The space between D sharp and E is a half step or semitone. The space between E and F is a semitone. The space between F sharp and G is a semitone, and so forth. The other unit of measurement that we utilize is actually two semitones, which is also referred to as a whole step. It's important to see that there are no sharps or flats between B and C and E and F when thinking about whole steps. As you can see here, the space between A and B is a whole step, but the space between A sharp and C is a whole step. Or the space between C and D is a whole step. The space between D and E is a whole step, but the space between D sharp and F is also a whole step. So it's best to think about music in the form of semitones, utilizing one semitone or two semitones to create your movements. So far, we've only talked about one octave, but the thing to note is that octaves continue in both directions pretty much infinitely, into the spectrum that the human ear can no longer hear it. And what we're doing is we're mapping out all the vibrations that are possible or audible to the human ear.